Palpatine cackling on his throne, star destroyers blotting out the sky. It is the perfect picture of tyranny. But what if the real danger was never the Empire at all? What if it was the Trade Federation hiding in plain sight? Think about it. Before the Death Star, before the Clone Wars, before the rise of Palpatine. The Federation was already blockading worlds, strangling economies and corrupting the Senate. They did not need fleets of stormtroopers. They had senators in their pocket and droid armies they could produce without end. That is not just villainy. That is control on a level the Empire could only dream of. The scary part is that it all looked legal. Blockades backed by contracts. Armies justified as corporate defense. Senators nodding along as if everything was normal. It was corruption dressed in respectability, and it worked. Entire systems were crushed without a single shot fired. That is a kind of tyranny far subtler and far deadlier than anything the Empire rolled out. And here is the irony. Palpatine did not overthrow the Republic with Sith lightning. He rode the chaos the Federation created. Without them, he does not become Chancellor. Without their separatist alliance, there is no Clone War. Without their corruption, there is no Empire. They were the architects of the galaxy's collapse. The Empire was just the byproduct. This is why the Federation deserves more attention than it gets. People laugh at the political side of the prequels, but those trade disputes were not filler. They were the warning signs. The real enemy was not a superweapon. It was greed. The Federation proved that the galaxy could be strangled with money and bureaucracy, long before it was crushed with a Death Star. In this video, we're going to break down why the Trade Federation was more dangerous than the Empire, how they nearly toppled the Republic from within, and why their legacy still shapes the galaxy long after their fall. When most people think of villains in Star Wars, the mind immediately goes to the Empire. The Death Star looming across the screen, stormtroopers marching in perfect lines, Darth Vader breathing down your neck. It is all loud, obvious and terrifying, but the Trade Federation was different. They did not need overwhelming firepower to bend the galaxy to their will. They used something even more insidious: money and control of trade. Take the blockade of Naboo, for example. No fleets of star destroyers. No superweapons. Just a bureaucratic organisation using its power to strangle an entire world's economy. That blockade set the stage for everything. It proved that one corporate entity could cripple a planet without firing a shot. Sure, the droid armies eventually rolled out, but the real power was already visible. They could use economics as a weapon, just as devastating as any turbo laser. This is what made them dangerous, but they operated under the Republic's nose with full Senate representation. The Empire had to overthrow the Senate and dissolve it outright. The Trade Federation never needed to. They corrupted it from the inside. Senators took bribes, laws were bent to accommodate shipping monopolies. Planets were forced to accept unfair trade deals. It was tyranny disguised as paperwork. And no one could really stop it. The droid army only made things worse. Unlike stormtroopers, who required recruitment training and resources, the droids were cheap, expendable, and endless. They could be manufactured in the millions without hesitation. And when they died, it meant nothing. No funerals, no backlash, no grieving families. It made war cost-effective in a way the Empire never achieved. Palpatine did not invent the war machine. The Trade Federation did. He just inherited it. Even more terrifying was how normalised this corruption became. The Republic allowed the Federation to maintain its own military force. That is the equivalent of Amazon having a private army of tanks and warships and then lobbying for more power in the government. Everyone knew it was wrong, but greed made it acceptable. That normalisation is far more dangerous than open tyranny, because it means the system itself has stopped caring. Consider how many conflicts were sparked not by Sith lightning, but by trade disputes. The Clone Wars themselves began because of corporate control of trade routes and alliances formed by economic power. When you trace the roots of the galaxy's downfall, it does not begin with Palpatine. It begins with corporations using the Republic as their playground. The Empire was the explosion. The Trade Federation was the slow poison. And look at the Jedi's response. They fought droid armies in battle after battle, but never once addressed the system that allowed corporations to build those armies in the first place. That silence speaks volumes. The Federation's corruption was so entrenched that even the Jedi treated it as normal. That is how deep the danger ran. When evil is normalized, it becomes invisible. The Federation also created the precedent for separating morality from war. It was easier to send clones against droids because the droids were not living beings. This was convenient for the Republic and later the Empire. It dulled the moral consequences of endless battles. The Federation built a war that felt clean on the surface but was rotten underneath. When you put it all together, the Trade Federation laid the blueprint for galactic tyranny. They showed how to weaponize economics, how to normalize corruption, how to mass-produce soldiers without accountability. The Empire may have looked scarier, but the Federation's methods were far more destructive in the long run. The real genius of the Trade Federation's power was subtlety. The Empire never tried to hide its intentions. It was dictatorship in the open. The Federation, on the other hand, kept everything cloaked in legitimacy. They had senators representing their interests. They had legal contracts backing their blockades. They had economic power that looked like free market trade. To most of the galaxy, they were just another corporation doing business. Until they were not. What makes this more dangerous than the Empire is that you could not fight it with blasters and starships. You cannot destroy corruption with an X-Wing. You cannot shoot your way out of a rigged Senate vote. The Trade Federation controlled the very system that was supposed to protect people. That is tyranny at its most insidious, because it convinces you that nothing is wrong until it is too late. And remember, the Federation was not alone. They had alliances with the banking clan, the Techno Union, and countless other corporate powers. Together they created a shadow empire before Palpatine ever raised the banner of the Galactic Empire. When the Separatist Alliance was born, it was not simply a rebellion against the Republic. It was a cartel of corporations that had already been pulling the strings for decades. This is why Palpatine barely had to lift a finger to destroy the Republic. It was already hollowed out from within. The Federation had trained the galaxy to accept corporate armies, to normalize corruption, to tolerate economic strangulation. Palpatine did not invent authoritarianism. He just consolidated what the corporations had already proven possible. The Federation also had a psychological edge. The Empire ruled through fear of punishment. The Federation ruled through dependency. Systems needed their shipping lanes for survival. If you defied them, your planet starved. That kind of control creates a population too desperate to rebel. The Empire needed stormtroopers on every street corner. The Federation only needed a blockade at the edge of your system. And then there is the scale of their influence. The Empire's reach was galactic, but everyone could see it. The Federation's reach was quieter, but just as vast. They controlled commerce guilds, mining operations, and interstellar trade. That meant your economy, your food supply, even your medicine could be dictated by a corporate vote. It is hard to imagine anything more terrifying than your survival depending on a profit margin. It is also worth noting that the Federation was not destroyed by the Empire. It was absorbed. Its power did not vanish. It simply became part of the Imperial machine. That tells you everything. The Empire's strength was built on the Federation's infrastructure. The Death Star was just the flashy sequel. The Federation's corruption was the original story. Fans often debate whether the prequels dragged too much with talk of trade disputes. But that was the point. The real villains were not just Sith Lords with red lightsabers. They were boardrooms of corrupt executives who showed that money could be sharper than any lightsaber. That is what makes the Federation chilling. It felt uncomfortably familiar. One had super weapons, the other had bureaucrats. But danger is not always measured in firepower. The Federation's danger was systemic. It infected the Republic from within and set the stage for every disaster that followed. That is more dangerous than any fleet. The Clone Wars themselves were proof of this. The war was not about ideology. It was not about democracy versus dictatorship. It was about corporations who wanted to preserve their profits and were willing to tear the Republic apart to do it. Millions of clones and droids died for what? Trade routes and tax policies. That is the ugliest truth in Star Wars, and it is one that the Federation embodies completely. Even Palpatine relied on them. His rise depended on the chaos they created. Without the Naboo crisis, he does not become Chancellor. Without the Separatist Alliance, he does not become Emperor. The Federation was his launchpad. and that makes them more dangerous than him in many ways. They created the chaos that gave him power. He just took advantage of it. From a thematic perspective, this makes the Federation scarier too. The Empire is space Nazis. Easy to hate and easy to identify. The Federation is corporate greed and corruption. Harder to see, harder to fight, and uncomfortably similar to our own world. That is why it resonates so strongly. Because you realise it is not just fantasy. It is a reflection of reality. The droid army itself is another angle. The Empire's stormtroopers could at least be reasoned with, or defect. Finn from the sequels proves that the Federation's droids had no morality, no hesitation, no conscience. That makes them both less scary individually and more terrifying as a whole. Because they are endless. You cannot sway them. You can only destroy them. And there are always more. And yet despite all this danger, the Federation rarely gets the recognition it deserves in the saga. Fans laugh about trade disputes. Critics mock the political storylines. But those elements were showing us the real monster. The Republic did not fall to a man with lightning. It fell to greed corporations and senators who sold themselves. That is what makes the Federation the true villain. If you remove the Federation from the timeline, the Empire never rises. The Jedi never become generals. The Clone Wars never happen. The galaxy remains flawed but not broken. Everything cascades from the Federation's corruption. That is why they were more dangerous. They were the catalyst, not the symptom. And even after their defeat, their legacy lingered. The Empire inherited their infrastructure. The First Order rose in their shadow. The idea that corporations could rule never truly died. It only evolved. That is the true danger. Not one group, but a system that never goes away. So when we say the Trade Federation was more dangerous than the Empire, it is not exaggeration. It is the uncomfortable truth that the most frightening villains in Star Wars were not Sith or stormtroopers. They were businessmen in robes sitting in a Senate chamber, smiling, as they sold out the galaxy.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.